We have a special guest with us today. We've not had the opportunity to have him with us before. John Ainsworth, who is the founder of America's Remedy, has come all the way from Pennsylvania?
Maine.
Maine?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, he came further than I thought. God's word will stand. He's going to join us today. In the past, we've had his director of media, Cliff Muncie, speak with us, but today John is going to be talking to us about understanding our history and how vital it is to restoring America's future. And so with that, I'm going to welcome to the stage John Ainsworth, and he's got profound information for us that I think you'll find very interesting.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say to everyone here, thanks for coming out in this weather. Thanks, Lynn, for inviting me and hosting this event. The amount of effort it takes to put these things on, and I agree with the past speakers that we really need to get to where we've got thousands out here trying to get America back and restore it to its foundation. Our Christian foundation covered pretty well by the previous speakers, and also I'd like to thank, this is a wonderful family, the Lovett family. They're doing a great job up here also, and the speakers that I've had before me, I don't expect the eloquent speech that the other speakers have had coming from me. They've done a great job of putting out what our problem is, what America used to be, where we're at today, and I think we're all in agreement that it's a pretty dismal place that we're in, and we're frustrated and we're trying to find out, how do we get out of this? We've got to answer the question, what happened? And that's what we're about with America's Remedy. I took 2 years off of work to research to try to figure out what happened with America back in the mid-90s. And it was pretty striking. And really what it goes down to is we've lost our foundation. Here we are on July 4th looking at, this is the birth of America. And it really is, the birth of America under its original foundation. But all that was overturned. And that's what we've got to look at. And it was overturned. It took God out of our society. And well, again, like I said, is the issue is not how we got here, but what we can do about it. And the theme of this is, Lord, heal our land. You know, we go to Second Chronicles, and I just want to read a little bit further than what's traditionally read of the first sentence. This is the Lord speaking to Solomon. He says, if, and that's if, my people who are called by my name, humble themselves and pray, and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. Now my eyes will be open and my ears attentive to the prayer that is made in this place. If you will walk before me, as David, your father, walked, doing according to all that I have commanded you, and keeping my statutes and my rules, then I will establish your royal throne. And if you turn aside and forsake my statutes and my commandments that I have set before you, and go and serve other gods and worship them, then he'll pluck you from the land. We've been plucked from our foundation. We strayed in the past. It didn't happen bit by bit. It happened by one fell stroke. In 2 Chronicles 7:14, it says, if people will turn from their wicked ways. What are these wicked ways that we have in our land? We're following false gods. We're following false teachers, and we're following false beliefs. We've got to turn from these false gods. Did we not see that in Israel? How many times did they start following false gods? We find ourselves in the same place. We need to start seeking wise counsel and that people getting together and talking about what happened in this land so that we can get it back. I'm going to start, even though we had a very good talks before on our foundation, I'm going to start with two quotes from our founding fathers. First is from James Madison. It says, "We have staked the whole of our political institutions upon the capacity of mankind for self-government, upon the capacity of each and all of us to govern ourselves, to control ourselves, to sustain ourselves according to the 10 Commandments of God." And then the one that we hear often also from Patrick Henry. "It cannot be emphasized too strongly or too often this great nation was founded not by religionists but by Christians, not on religion but on the gospel of Jesus Christ." And with that quote from Patrick Henry, I want to go to his famous speech. And I want to have you look at the struggle he was having. Now, this was a couple of years before 1776, and he's looking at what we're looking at today, an out-of-control government, and what are we going to do about it? And this is selected portions of that famous speech. "Should I keep back my opinions at such a time through fear of giving offense? I should consider myself as guilty of treason towards my country and an act of disloyalty toward the majesty of heaven, which I revere above all earthly kings. Mr. President, is it natural to men to indulge in the illusions of hope? We are apt to shut our eyes against the painful truth and listen to the song of the siren until she transforms us into beasts. For my part, whatever anguish of spirit it may cost, I am willing to know the whole truth, to know the worst, and to provide for it." And that's a question I want to ask you. Are we prepared to know the whole truth and then to provide for it and to know the worst? Because we've got some bad things in our history that we need to deal with that deal with how we lost the foundation. Patrick Henry goes on. He says, Sir, we are not weak if we make a proper use of those means of which the God of nature hath placed in our power. The millions of people armed in the holy cause of liberty, and in such a country as that which we possess, are invincible by any force which our enemy can send against us. Besides, sir, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just God who presides over the destiny of nations, who will rise up friends to fight our battles for us. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. Why stand here idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not. It's hard to say those words. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Today I'm going to go over a topic that's very uncomfortable in this present age of extreme political correctness. We have often heard that two wrongs don't make a right. How many times have we heard that two rights can make a wrong? And I think it's been discussed here today. We've talked about our rights, where do they come from? And we talk about our rights coming from two different places. America was founded on the principle that our rights come from God. We had the unalienable rights of God. All that changed. Between 1861 and 1865, the United States had what is often called a civil war, even though there was nothing civil about it. And the major change in American law that came out of the American Civil War was a change in where our rights come from. They no longer come from God. How many people have ever been taught this? It's a fundamental change. We originally had our rights coming from God. Now we have rights which come from an anti-Christian, anti-God, humanist belief system. And that's what we see in force today. The issue I'm going to get at is what we today call civil rights. We're taught to embrace civil rights because we're told that these give rights to blacks, but I want to show you what civil rights have done in our country. In 1980, the display of 10 Commandments was declared unconstitutional because it violated the civil rights the federal government had laid out. Now, what does our God say? Does our God tell us to proclaim His law? Does our God tell us to declare His name? To declare His glory among our countrymen, to speak it publicly? Yes, it does. What did civil rights do? They said you cannot declare God's name in public. It's not going to be in the schools. In 1963, in the Supreme Court case of Abington versus Shemp, better known as Murray versus Corlett, Madeline Murray O'Hare, they took prayer out of school because it violated civil rights. Not God-given rights, civil rights that came from the American Civil War. It said you cannot say prayers, Christian prayers to your children. Does that violate what God says? We have two sets of rights in this country. Which one do we choose? Lawrence versus Texas in 2003, homosexuality was declared a civil right. Roe versus Wade, abortion, violated the civil rights of Roe. In an article published in October 22nd, 2014, I'm going to read from it. It says, while President Barack Obama said during his first presidential campaign in 2008 that he thought marriage was strictly between one man and one woman, he now has confidently stated that same-sex marriage is guaranteed under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Now, why does he say the 14th Amendment? The 14th Amendment is what created, what implemented civil rights in this country. So under the 14th Amendment is what gives us gay marriage. Well, let's just talk about how this all happened. What does our history say about this situation? We know we fought a war. Oops. Try to keep up my time here. We know we fought a war between 1861 and 1865. What was the product of that war? That war was over in 1865, and there's a lot of history that can be said. I'm not as good as the speaker that gave us the entire book of Revelation in 20 minutes. I can't give you the entire history of the Civil War and what all happened in 20 minutes. But what happened was the war was fought over state rights, whether states had a right to do what they wanted, or whether the federal government had control over the states. And basically, the federal government won, said it had control over states, so it had control over the rights of the people. It nationalized citizenship. The 14th Amendment was proposed in 1866, and again, this is the amendment that is going to force civil rights upon the American people. The 14th Amendment was proposed in June of 1866. All the southern states were considered back in the Union. North Carolina, South Carolina, we were in the Union, participating in the Union in 1865. We abolished slavery. The 13th Amendment was passed in December of 1865. North Carolina participated in that. It was considered back in the Union in 1865. 1866, they proposed the 14th Amendment, which was going to nationalize citizenship, which was going to give Congress the authority to decide what the rights of all people are, civil rights. The southern states rejected it, all with the exception of Tennessee. And most of the northern states rejected the proposed 14th Amendment. It wasn't going to pass. So what did Congress do? Congress passed the Reconstruction Acts. What was the purpose of the Reconstruction Acts? The purpose of the Reconstruction Acts was to annul 10 states and then coerce them and force them to pass the 14th Amendment. Here's what happened. Congress said, the state of North Carolina, you're null. You don't exist anymore. That you've got to have a new constitution. You've got to send it to Congress. Congress has to accept it. And then, when we accept this new constitution, composed of people that are loyal to Congress, not loyal to your state anymore, he said, at that point, we will, at that point that we admit your state into the Union, you're required by your legislature to pass the 14th Amendment. This is in the law. Congress passed a law that annulled the state of North Carolina and said, you can't come back in until you pass the 14th Amendment. And they went a step further. They said not only pass the 14th Amendment, but you are all states. The 14th Amendment is required to become part of the national constitution before you can seat senators and representatives in Congress. Is that how we amend the Constitution? But that's what we're sitting under today. Andrew Johnson, President of the United States, vetoed all these acts as unconstitutional. And he said this in one of his vetoes. He says, another ground upon which these Reconstruction Acts are attempted to be sustained is this, that these 10 states are conquered territory. Conquered territory. Where does Congress get the authority to conquer states? The total purpose and function of any government is to guarantee and protect the rights of the people involved in that government, which to the federal government was the states. They had no authority to annul them. Well, 14th Amendment was passed. The state of North Carolina that's in operation today is actually the second state of North Carolina that entered the Union. It entered the Union because, remember, the first one was annulled by an act of Congress, and they were going to have this other state come into the Union under these Reconstruction Acts, and it entered the Union on June 25th, 1865. June 25th, 1868. June 25th is when the state that's operating in Raleigh today came into the American Union. Excuse me. Their coming into the American Union was vetoed by the president. Congress had a supermajority that passed over the president. And so what happened? The governor of North Carolina refused to leave his seat of the original state of North Carolina, refused to leave his seat. So General Canby, a United States general in the United States Army, issued General Order number 120 and ordered the removal of the governor of North Carolina from the governor's office on July 1st, 1868. Remember, the new state came in on June 25th. The new governor the old governor was removed by military order July 1st, 1868. Now, what did people say about the 14th Amendment? James G. Blaine was one of the congressmen from Maine, and he loved the 14th Amendment. And he said that he was trying to sell it out. And a lot of people say, well, the 14th Amendment and this new set of rights is really for the black man. But James G. Blaine said this. He said, in making this extension of citizens, we are not confining the breadth and scope of our efforts to the Negro. It is for the white man as well. We intend to make citizenship national. And then he says this. As the vicious theory of state rights had been constantly at enmity with the true spirit of nationality, the organic law of the Republic, which is our Constitution, should be so amended that no standing room for the heresy would be left. So no standing room for state rights. Where did our rights come from prior to this amendment? It came from the people of the states, and we said our rights came from God. After this amendment was passed, Congress said they have the authority to decide what our rights are. And they said that they are a godless government, that they're going to have separation of church and state. There is no place that they're going to have equality for all. In America, we worship civil rights. That's one of our gods that we get an affection to, and we don't know how to separate ourselves because it feels prickly when we talk about it. It makes the hair on your back go up because we've been so indoctrinated. This is a great concept, a great bestowment upon the people until we see what it did. In Daniel chapter 3, when Nebuchadnezzar was making his idol and commanding everyone to worship it, and I'm going to compare his idol, him being a representative of government, and his idol being American civil rights. He says, King Nebuchadnezzar, and this is from Daniel 3:1. Basically, he made an image. He told the people to bow down to it. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound, the nations and peoples of every language fell down and worshiped the image of gold that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. That's what we have today. Everybody's bowing down and worshiping. But what's the next sentence? But there were some Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up. And Nebuchadnezzar confronted them and said, "What are you doing? I'm going to send you to the fiery furnace if you don't bow down." And they says, "If we are thrown into the burning blaze, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve other gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." In America, we have educators, we have historians, we have constitutional so-called scholars and experts who fear society's and government's furnace of fire. They refuse to stand up and talk about this part of our history because they're afraid they're going to be labeled a bigot, a racist. Heck, I don't even need to start labeling them. We all know what they are. And they do not teach the truth. Reconstruction basically created, I think, what we could equate by the earlier speakers, a prodigal nation. It allowed us this humanistic experiment to go out and experiment with immoral indulgence for 100 years. We got to do whatever we want outside of God, like the prodigal son. How has that served us? It's time to return to the Father, people. It's time to ask for forgiveness and get back under the rule of our Father. Over the years, I've run across many frustrated people, and I've run across people who said they're ready for an armed revolution. Of course, I'm always trying to stop all that. We must exhaust the avenues of remedy. America does not need a new revolution. We don't need that. We need a return to our foundation of reliance on God. We need to stop being deceived. And that's what we live in today. We live in a world of deception. We need a return to the truth. We need restoration. We need revival. That's what this country needs. We have to decide to get back to God. Healing our land begins with faith in and reliance on God. If we start seeking truth of what happened to us, this historical stuff, I'm not saying this truth is going to free us. I'm not here to say I'm a savior or what this history, if you know it, will save us. It takes action. It takes a prayerful people who are willing to stand up and not be afraid, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who are willing to stand up for what our foundation was, which was so eloquently talked about here by many speakers, and say, I'm not going to put up with it. We actually have legal remedy if we will pursue it, and we are looking for people who want that remedy. It's a nonviolent legal remedy that we have a right to. We have a right under God. We have a right, even under this godless government, to petition against unconstitutional actions, the Reconstruction Acts, the acts that were put into place by Reconstruction that converted us where our rights come from God to our rights come from the federal government. How many people like the rights coming from the federal government? I think the results have been pretty darn good. We have a way to get out from underneath that if we will learn what happened. One of the things I want to say is I want to give people hope. This is a positive message. You know, Patrick Henry says, let me know the worst so that I can prepare for it. We need to know the worst, not so that we can be fearful, but so that we can prepare for it. This is where we need people who are going to come together, counsel together, and discuss this. And there are many of the ministers here that I would love to talk to after this, because we've got to get the church involved. We've got to get godly people involved. We can have a miracle. We can have faith that God will move mountains if we will pray, seek His face, keep His commands, have faith in Him, and stand up and not be afraid. Once we have faith in God, we should not be afraid of man. We have, at America's Remedy, we have a lot of resources. You can come talk to me, talk to Cliff and Sarah back there behind the camera. We need people involved. We need people getting educated. We've got people getting educated in Texas and Virginia, kind of all over the country, of what we're doing here. I'd like for you people to go visit us on Facebook at americasremedy.com. You can watch our videos on YouTube and start getting an understanding. We put a bunch of this stuff out for free, but we will also do seminars and come and talk with you. You can follow us on Facebook. But people, it's not government's fault we don't have lawful government. It's not government's fault that we don't have a moral foundation. It's not government's fault that we're worshiping idols in this country. It's our fault because we haven't learned what it takes to get our freedom back. I want to thank everyone for having me here today. I want to thank Lynn. This is a great crowd, of great speakers. I'm proud to be a member of this or a part of this, and I just appreciate everything you're doing. Thanks.
I would encourage you to go get some information from John and Cliff and Sarah. That it's amazing stuff that I didn't know, and I'm sure a lot of us don't know.